Okay, so hello, everyone. We're going to look at now a topic that I have been mentioning whilst we were doing classes, um, that is related to classes, and in your inheritance we are still going to use classes, but the only difference or most important thing about inheritance is why do we make use of inheritance. So remember, in your classes, we did mention that the only thing that's important for your class is to actually have a structure, to define a class, um, uh, to categorize classes. So that now, what inheritance does, which is what sets it apart, is that inheritance groups classes. Okay. So in order for you to understand inheritance, so let us first look at the definition of inheritance over here. So what it says is inheritance is the principle that you can apply knowledge of a general category to more specific objects. So the advantages of that is that it saves time, it reduces um, the chance of errors, it makes easier to understand the inherited class, and it makes the program easier to write. So those are the four advantages of inheritance. So over here we've got a class. So this is just a UML class diagram. This single thing. So this is a class diagram, an example of an employee class. So in our class, we've got an employee number, we've got an employee salary, and we've got a method to get a greeting. What does the employee do? So now, because we now have to use inheritance, it is clear that there is groups of employees that, or types of employees that need to be grouped. So this over here, this arrow says this class, the commission employee, is a type of an employee. Okay, so if you were to have a second type of an employee, you're going to have that over here, and then for an example, you're going to call this one a full-time employee, and it's still going to inherit from this class. Okay, so these are now groups of employees. So remember what I said? We said that this allows you to group your classes. Inheritance allows you to group your classes so that there's a relationship between the child class and the, the base class. Okay, so just some terminology that we need to get our heads around. So we've got what we know as the base class. So this is the class that is used as a basis for inheritance. We can also call this class the superclass or the parent class. And I'm going to explain why. And the classes that inherit from the base class, and in our example, the employee class, those are the derived classes or the extended classes. And there's a relationship between those classes, between the derived class and the base class, and that relationship is an is-a relationship. And why is it called an is-a relationship? Is because if you've got a class that is called employee, that has employees, and you've got a second class that is called, like we saw in our example, the commission employee, and there's that arrow over there. Therefore, the reason why this is an is-a, it says a commission employee is also an employee. So that's the relationship between the two. That's why in inheritance we've got an is-a relationship. So you can also have, for an example, a class that employee inherits from. Okay, and you're going to call now this class an ancestor to the child class. So you can have as many classes or inheritance chain in your inheritance. Okay. Now, how do you specify that a class inherits from another class? So here we have an example called a student. So we're now working with a student class. Now our student class has a student number, a name, fees, and an exam mark. And we've got two types of students. We've got a part-time student and we've got a full-time student. And if we want to say both these are students, in order for us to show that both these classes inherit from the student class, we need to do so using student. So after our class name, we put a colon and then we write the name of the class that this class inherits from. So part-time student and full-time students are both students. So the relationship here says a part-time and a full-time student is a student. And both these classes have access to every method that is in this class. So we're going to see when we are using now, when we write in code, I'm going to create a video for code for you. So when you use code, you're going to now see that this class can have access, can be able to use the student number, even though there's no student number over here and there's no student number over here. It can use student number, it can use name, it can use fees, because it inherits all that from this class. Okay. Now here's our example. So over here we've got a form, and our form has a radio button for full-time student, and there's a radio button for part-time student. So when you click the radio button for full-time student, you're going to display the information that is related to a full-time student. And if you see here, when we instantiate our full-time student class, we're able to have access to student number, name, fees, and exam mark, which were not being declared inside this class, but were declared in the student class, which is the parent class of this class. And then when we display that, we display the values related to our full-time student. And that's the same with our part-time student. This has access to all the properties inside the student class, even though they were not declared in the part-time student. So that is why we're saying that this saves time, and this makes your code look much better and easier for you to code. Okay, so that is now the first part of your inheritance video. So we're going to look at now the second part.